Hi, it's Amanda DeVito Parle. Welcome to my podcast, At the Kitchen Table, where we will guide, inspire, and connect.
Well, hi, Jess.
Hi, Amanda.
Welcome to my podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So we call this At the Kitchen Table because so much of how I find myself in this business is at people's kitchen tables, like counseling them and advising them. And I know you do too in the nature of your business. And we could talk about the mortgage industry, which is your gig, but we should talk about something else.
Okay,
That's
deal.
more interesting.
Let's do it.
Like, I think one of the things that's interesting for me, and I want you to introduce yourself, and I want you to tell our listeners like who you are and how you came to this place.
Okay.
But I come at our interview and our relationship and our friendship from a different perspective because I like you so much because you and I have the same same standards. We have this like direct nature. We love to win and win others over and to run great teams. And we love the people that we surround ourselves with. And I just think there's something more interesting here to talk about in terms of like team culture and atmosphere and winning.
Leadership.
Than mortgages, which is a part of the business that's brought us together to be able to sort of have this conversation. But tell us a little just about like, how did you come into the mortgage business? Who are you? And how did you get here?
Yeah. So I got into the business right out of college. I thought I was going to be a dentist, and that never transpired. Fell into the mortgage industry like most people. Nobody pursues mortgage generally. But I took to it immediately. Immediately took to it, found that this is my jam. Started having big success. I entered the market during a refinance boom, which in early 2000s, which I'm aging myself a little bit. And it was also the start of the internet. So a lot of the clients I was meeting, I was introduced to on the internet. So I have cut my teeth in sales with internet sales. And then 5 years into the business, decided I should have a more traditional business and not be a commodity and pursue realtors. And so that's how we met, is I was building my network here in the Denver market. And my business grew really fast, and so I started having to hire a team to support me in order to be able to maintain the relationships that I had. My husband and I would always go back and forth earlier in my career that it was like I couldn't turn the spout at the level that I wanted. You know, he's like, you're too busy. Like, I'm pregnant, typing at a computer at 1 a.m, trying to submit loans to underwriting, you know, and he's like, you're too busy. And I'm like, well, do I tell realtor partners, don't send me clients? Like, that's one thing about this business that's been kind of interesting is that it ebbs and flows a lot, right?
Where that push and pull, right?
Yeah, market conditions, and sometimes you're too busy and you're not busy enough. And so built a team, have built amazing relationships with a ton of agents, and I've made absolutely every mistake in business possible, which I know you have too. That's one of the things I love getting together and talking to you about, is that we can be real with each other and vulnerable and be like, well, that really sucked, you know? And I like that part of our friendship.
Me too. So you come into the industry, you're building this team, and if we can go down sort of the team's route, you know, where did the team concept come from to you? How did you know at that point that you needed help? Like, what was the signals that said to me, like, I need help, and I know the spigot is one of them. Like, who was your first hire, and how did you get that thing off the ground, the team piece?
I love that question. So I had just had my second baby. I was closing 10 loans a month, which was a lot. This was like in 2010 or so. But I had colleagues closing 20 loans a month, and I was working like 80 hours a week. So I was like, how is it possible if I'm working 80 hours a week, how are you closing 20 loans a month? And I'm so competitive, and I think I'm a big thinker. So I was like, if he can do 20 loans a month, there has to be something I'm missing. So I call this guy in California. I didn't have a relationship with him, and I'm like, how are you doing this? I'm working as many hours as possible. And he's like, oh, I have a team. And I was like, you what? And he's like, yeah, I have people that support me to do all these loans. And I was like, wow. And he's like, hey, come to this thing. He invited me to this sales conference, this coaching platform. So I went to the coaching platform, and their mantra was like creating millionaires, basically. Like, we'll teach you how to go from being a salesperson to building a 7-figure business and onboarding team. So I plugged into this program and did what they told me to do, and it grew fast. But the one thing in retrospect, looking back, is they didn't really teach me how to be an entrepreneur. They taught me, like, hire this person and have them chase documents, and hire this person and have them go in the market and deliver things to realtors, but I think there's no way to really learn how to be an entrepreneur except falling on your face over and over and over again. And I think it's having that experience of learn, like, every entrepreneur has to go through that. That's the only way you become really good, is failing over and over again.
Yeah. So if you can step back and think about some of the
early team members?
Well, the early team members and some of maybe the early mistakes you made with that, and what did you learn from that?
Oh my gosh. So hiring for me was such a train wreck. Like, I recently sat down with one of my longest standing employees, and we were giggling at some of the people that have been on our team.
Remembering all these people.
Just because they were so off from what we are, what we represent, or who we want to be in the market, right? So just really poor hiring decisions, hiring friends, hiring people's family, like having nepotism go on in my office, empowering too much. I don't know if you've done that, but like giving so much power to one person that then there's like this power dynamic between the leader and that person.
Sure.
I've made every hiring mistake, but I do think ultimately you never stop learning, because what you need is always evolving.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Well, so I'm curious, like, how did you know what you wanted your culture to be? And then how do you realize when you've got a good fit or a bad fit in the culture? And then how do you change that? Or how has the culture evolved for you? And how do you know you've got it right? Or do you?
I think it's a good mixture of, what I've had good success with is hiring the person, not necessarily their experience. Like, and I know this is true in real estate for agents and so forth, and even operational employees, is like, you can train anything if you have the right person.
Sure.
They have the right grit, the right work ethic, the right drive. I think emotional intelligence is so important. Like, they can be super organized, have all this experience, their resume is amazing, but if they don't have like a high level of emotional intelligence, like just not having to be told things, they just know it.
Yeah.
That's such an important thing. I had this team member recently that was so evolved from an emotional intelligence standpoint. She was so good. Like, she came into my team and she like knew exactly what I needed and stayed ahead of me and pulled me, and she's no longer on my team. But it was something that I learned so much from that experience of like, it's hiring the right person and like being, I don't know if you've ever read that book, Not How, But Who. I
have not read it. I know what you're talking
amazing.
about, though. Because the who is so much more important,
it's so important
than the how.
It is.
Right.
It is. It's hiring the right who. And I think even that's another thing is earlier in my career, I just wanted to keep bringing bodies on. Like, I need another person because I'm drowning, right? Like, let's just bring on more people.
Did that give you the relief?
No.
Okay.
No.
Why do you think?
More people, more drama, more problems, more, headaches.
So is that really, you feel that's true, like bigger team, bigger problems, bigger personnel issues.
Yes.
And so is there a sweet spot? What does it look like in the mortgage space, but in the team space, what does a sweet spot look like?
I think it's, for me, I think some people, like, I was just listening to a podcast. I love Ed Milet. I was just listening to him recently, and he was saying having, 400 people report to you is no different from a stress perspective as having 4 people. And I would disagree for myself. Yeah. Like, I don't think I'm cut out to have that many
400 people looking for you.
Yeah. He's like, stress is stress. No, I don't think so. So I think I do better in a smaller team dynamic. And right now I have 10 people on my team. And that to me is a smaller team.
Okay.
And I'm very comfortable, in that space. I can have good, deep relationships with everybody. I can like look at everyone's faces on one team meeting and get a sense of who's off that day, who do I need to kind of lean into. It's my jam, is I like being in that smaller team environment. But I made the mistake earlier on of just continually adding bodies, thinking that was going to solve my, the amount of work on my plate.
Okay, so I'm curious that you have these humans with this human dynamic on your team, right? Some of them are lovely to build into the culture. Some of them are great team players, and some are not. And it's kind of constantly evolving. Have you ever had it happen where somebody like actually wanted your role and they started to sort of jockey for like being the sort of the lead or the queen. And I wonder how do you do queen bee in your organization, and how do you deal with people who like want your job?
I haven't run across somebody who wants my job yet.
You didn't let them in. You were like, out you go. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I haven't run across that person. I think once people see what I do, they are like, I don't want any of that. Right? And I'm sure it's true for you too.
Yeah. For sure.
But I did have someone on my team for a very long time that during the pandemic, he closed $100 million of loans that were my relationships or my clients that were referred to him. And he thought highly of himself, that he was such a baller at what he did. And he was very talented to be able to do that. But then he wanted to like, I'm going to leave and go do this myself because I'm qualified to do so, which is cool. Like, I think and that's another big lesson I've had is we weren't intended to lead people and hold on to them. You know, like part of what our responsibility as team leads and leaders is to help prepare people for to be off on their own, doing their thing. And we can't hold on to everybody. Like part of our assignment on this earth is to impact people. And that doesn't mean holding them on our own team forever. Mm-hmm. So I was happy for him to leave, but he was probably the closest person in my universe that maybe sort of tried to say, like, I'm to your level, basically, or gave me that impression that he would want to take my job. But I don't think he wanted to do what I do.
How do you think, when you're not in the room, how do you think people talk about you? What do they say? Who are you? How do people describe you?
Very driven, kind of cutthroat. Like I am kind of no BS kind of girl. I think good at what she does. Like I think that the fact that I am consistently succeeding regardless of my conditions. Mm-hmm. I don't know. What would you say?
Oh, I think that's all true. And I think it's I talk about a speedboat, and there are just some people who can go fast, mm-hmm. and who like the thrill of the speedboat, who love to be on the speedboat, and I feel that way with you, that you are this driver on this speedboat and it goes fast. But I actually think, is to pay you a compliment really, is that you have this way of slowing down for people when they're in front of you. That is interesting, because nobody accomplishes the things that you're accomplishing without a speedboat. Mm-hmm. But you pay people this respect by slowing down when you're with them. And I think that's a trait that probably the driver of you doesn't get complimented enough on.
Thank you.
But I know that when we're together, you have this way of sort of slowing down. And frankly, I think that's probably what's made you very good at your business.
Thank you.
Is that when you're engaging with the client, when they really need you, you are able to cut the engine and coast for a little bit mm-hmm. with them, so that you can hear what they have to say, and that you guys can kind of glide along here. And I do think that's something that you do well. And I think that's a learned thing, to just really tune into people. How did you become like that?
That's interesting. And by the way, that was a very nice compliment, so thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Having had a lot of salespeople work for me, I've had to try to explain how I interact with clients and realtor partners and things like that. And one thing that I've learned that it's hard to teach is kind of what you're talking about, which is I sort of model myself off of whoever I'm with, their energy, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm with a client that's like a super high D, direct, very sensitive to her time, let's say, and she wants to tell me what she wants, and she's got a limited amount of time to tell me, mm-hmm. I'm going to just like go with her and just say, okay, you got it, and get her off the phone as quickly as possible. So I kind of I'm a chameleon with the people I'm with to match their energy. And then I also feel like I have a high level of intuition that I tap into to kind of, and I know you do that too, like tap into to sort of meet people where they need me to meet them.
It's interesting because you have all these deep relationships with all these realtors for whom you're tuned into where they need to be met at. And I'm curious, you probably see these realtor partners that you do a lot of business with making very common, simple mistakes. If you could give those realtors advice, what would it be?
Ooh, Like my partners?
Your partners who are good brokers. For the most part, the people you're doing business with are producing brokers. And maybe it could be a variety of things that you're seeing realtors do that you wish they didn't.
You know, it's interesting because right now we're in a season where buyers are idle. Like every single consumer I'm talking with right this moment is saying, I'm going to buy in the next 6 months. That's just what I'm hearing. But nobody wants to buy this month or next month, right? It's like, I'm going to buy in the next 6 months, which I think people are delaying their timeline into early next year is what it feels like, even though you and I might say to them, historically, buying in the first 5 months of the year, at least in our market, it's going to be more competitive, right? You're going to maybe pay a premium from seasonality perspective. Mm-hmm. But I think what I watch a lot of agents do, like they need business, but I don't know if their follow-up is that good.
Right. Yeah, they're bad lead generators.
I don't know that they're necessarily bad lead generators. I think they give up on prospects that if you research like sales, the average prospect converts after like 8 or 9 touches. You know what I mean? Like
these people try twice and then they don't call back.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They're like, oh, they were waiting. You're like, no, they were waiting like 3 months. You know what I mean? So I think like the follow-up, I think, is really critical. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I would say is confidence. Mm-hmm. Some of these agents I work with are phenomenal. They're so good at what they do, but they still question themselves, and they're questioning themselves. We are in unique market conditions that we've never seen. Yeah. You know, we have increasing inventory, like increasing a lot. Mm-hmm. We have interest rates that are stubborn, inflation stubborn. We don't know exactly when our rate's going to come down, right? And so you're trying to give your sellers advice at the kitchen table, but you're giving them your best guess ultimately on what's going to happen, right? Based on your experience, and you're setting expectations that like, I don't know for sure. We're in unique conditions right now, but I do think that I watch a lot of even really good real estate agents internalize that it's like their fault that the market is what it is, you know, or they take it on as like, I'm not doing well by my clients. And I think that having confidence to just say, I had an agent explained to me, and I'm going to share it with you. An agent explained to me today that she's been in the business a very long time. And she says, I've learned that I'm going to be, what did she say? Like a boxer, you know, the guy in the ring that's helping him, the coach, that's like, I'll have your spit bucket and I'll cheer you on between rounds. But, you know, this is your fight to have, you know, like when it comes to a listing. She's like, I'm there to cheer. I'm there for your spit bucket. I'm here to be your power of positivity with you. But ultimately, these are your rounds, right? So how long you decide to keep going as a seller on the market. And after 8 or 9 rounds, you feel really, really beat up, you know? So she's no longer internalizing and taking it on as her own, like, I did wrong by my seller. She's completely flipped the script on herself to say, I'm here for support. I'm here to, you know, if you want to keep going, I'll let you keep going, you know, those sorts of things. I just was like, wow, that's a really cool analogy. And it goes back to what I was just saying about having confidence. Like, it's how you view yourself of what your responsibility is to your client. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't attach your confidence to the outcome of your client on yourself.
Well, and sometimes there's a cadence to the year, to the transaction that you simply can't control.
Exactly.
So, you know, we get so caught up where we're like, well, I used to sell houses in 2 weekends and now I can't sell them in 2 months. Something must be wrong with me.
Totally. That's what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. That's the confidence issue that agents have to stop doing.
Yeah. And it's hard not to do that, especially I think a lot of the mistakes that real estate and lender friends of ours make is that they box themselves in to not having enough savings and not having enough time to ride out a seasonality of the market that just doesn't allow them to breathe or to have flexibility. And that's a scary place for people to be in. So I think their cadence and their ability to overcome these things gets very short, and then their fear comes creeping in really quickly. And I do think that's a mistake, that we just leave ourselves short when the tide is high. And then when the tide goes back out, we're nervous. We're so nervous that the tide won't come back in. And I don't know. I just think real estate agents are such squirrels. They operate on such tight timelines, and they don't give themselves the seasonality to sort of this breadth of the year to make money and to plan and to be strategic. And so I just wonder if it's always such the game of real estate is such a pursuit of the thing that's next in front of you right now. This cadence to the transaction and to the next client is so short that it's hard to step back in a boxing ring and say, you can go 9 rounds if you'd like. Mm-hmm. I'll just be here catching your spit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Catching the spit in the spit bucket. You love to win.
I love to win.
Where did you get that? Did you have a brother that beat you at Sorry your whole life or something?
A sister, but yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. No, I came from a family of girls. There's 3 of us. No, I've always had that ever since I was I played basketball even in elementary school, and I would foul out of every game. Right. Literally, my family, it's like the butt of the jokes in our family is that Jess, there she goes. She's got fouled out again. Because I was so passionate and driven and wanted to win and would go to every extreme. Mm-hmm. And that's just how I'm wired, which I'm grateful for in some regards. And then it's also incredibly exhausting at other times.
And the people around you just shake their heads sometimes. They're like, really? You knocked her out again? I'm sorry, it's basketball. I know we're 10, but I just couldn't help myself. So it's funny because can you draw on either of your kids? Are they with a winning type? Do you see in them that you were?
My older son, he's 15. He has my same personality. So he's very super driven. He wants to win.
You beat him in Sorry though, right?
Oh yeah, we go head to head when we're playing any board game.
So you were raised of girls and now you're raising boys.
I have 2 boy dogs, 2 boy kids, and my husband. So all boys and me, which is really fun. But even when I go play, I'll play football or soccer or something. I'm the one that's rough with my boys. Alan will be my husband will be like, chill out. We're just playing.
Well, they have to learn to stand up for themselves. They got to learn to take a hit. You're charging at the boys. Okay. Well, so winning is your thing. That's innate. That was in there. That's just who you are.
That is. It's how I was wired.
How do you settle that down though in business? How do you make that distinction? Because and do you lose your temper? Is temper a different thing?
It's funny because you were talking about fear a little earlier, and I was going to stop you and say let's dig into that because what I find myself doing as a leader is I oscillate between fear and faith as a leader, and my team can watch the dynamic going on. So, for example, I talk about faith and how I feel like we're being provided for and supported and the resources we need are coming. And I try to lead with giving my team confidence around certain things. And I try to bring some of my own philosophies to the table. But occasionally I'll tip into a fearful moment.
Yeah.
And I bring that energy to my team.
Oh, sure.
And it's the most harmful energy that you can have in any relationship with your team member, with a client, with a business partner. That energy does make you
seem out of control. Right.
You just show up differently than you really authentically are.
Sure.
Because it's being in that side of you that might be a victim or that side of you that might be self-conscious, more fearful, that side of you that no one's proud of, right? Mm-hmm. And when you show up from that space in any relationship, you're not your best self. Mm-hmm. And so as a leader, especially leading a team of 10 plus people through a mortgage storm over the last 2.5 years, I've really had to keep my fearful self in check as best I can. And it's hard.
And so when she comes out and you've had a slip, a moment where you accidentally just didn't show up your best self, how do you reconcile that with your managers or your teams or your LOs or people that are working for you? How do you fix that? How do you patch it up? I
try to be very quick to be vulnerable with my team and say, here's how I'm feeling. You know what I mean? And I don't intend to bring that into our meeting today. You know what I mean? We recently transitioned companies, and so my team and I were recalibrating to our new company, our new team size, the market is really odd, as I've said a couple times. You know, there's just a lot of interesting stuff going on right now. So I'm being tested a lot recently.
Yeah.
And I'm really having to take walks every morning and put on like peaceful music and try to like center myself and like really prepare to show up to lead every day. And I'm grateful for it because I think that it's through these moments of adversity that build your like leadership character and who you ultimately, going through these storms, it forms you into who you're meant to be and who the leader you're going to become. So on one hand, I'm super grateful for it, but it is, it's been more challenging for me as a leader to be able to show up as the leader I'm proud of every day, going through some of these, you know, conditions that we have right now.
I do think there is a growing anxiety in the industry.
I couldn't agree more.
It feels like it's pulsing now, that it has its own heartbeat, which is so interesting to me. I just feel like I can't put my hand on that. Maybe you can. I don't know if it's just the season of the storm that we're in, or the part of the storm that we're in. I don't know if it's that, you know, presidential election years bring their own anxiety. I don't want to put too much emphasis on that, but I do think it does. I think that I always see the seasonality of a presidential cycle every 4 years. This is my 5th presidential cycle I've worked in real estate through, and that certainly has its own cadence where the politicians do a fabulous job of making everybody on both sides perfectly scared. So we have 50% of people who are pretty sure that the end is coming on both sides of every deal here. And it's funny, I do feel that anxiety shakes off after the presidential election is over. People are like, ugh, oh, I'm so glad that's over with, like the minute it's done. And I do feel some of that building right now. I do think that there's this building anticipation that the market conditions are going to give way, or they're going to change, and it's going to be better again fast. And I'm trying to put my hands on that. Is it that we've gotten so comfortable in such favorable market conditions for so long?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, if you look back, basically from 2013, when we came out of the last like big recession that we had in housing, to 2022. So 2013 to 2022, we had a 9-year cycle where it was really good.
Yeah, and
really good.
Agents who've been in the business for 10 years or less,
yeah,
they only know a high tide.
And we had interest rates at 4% as the average rate during that whole time.
For 9 years, yeah.
Yeah, for 9 years. So I think anyone can do well in real estate in those conditions. And then some of the things that are going on right now, you know, we recently got a little tease on interest rates. We dropped down to 6 and came way back up to, you know, 6.75%. But there's a little tease that like the market's going to get better. And I think a lot of people are barely hanging on emotionally, hoping for that better market. You know, maybe they're running out of reserves or, you know, just hoping it's going to be better. And I think that we're feeling a lot of that energy amongst it. I think the new compensation discussions that have been going on, and I'm reading about all kinds of different dynamics in the market right now that I think it feels unsettling.
Yeah.
So I think people are responding to that.
Yeah, for sure. As it relates to the mortgage part of the business with that anxiety, are you seeing the consumers show up very hesitant with a lot of, I mean, are we going to get back to a normal rate condition? What is that? And how do we build some confidence around the consumer if the agent pool and the lender pool is anxious or nervous or underprepared, and then the clients are picking up some of that tone, or the clients are picking up political ads all over America, wherever they live? How do you stabilize that feeling that it's going to be okay and that people should buy, and at what rate should they buy, and what does that feel like to firm that up for people so it's not so nerve-wracking?
I think the number one problem amongst the consumer population right now is the online mortgage calculator, to be honest, because you go plug in a house price off Zillow and you go look at Google, what are rates today? And let's say they're 6.75%. The average consumer looks at the house price, looks at that rate, looks at that payment, and is like, nope, I can't do it.
Right.
However, not very many of my clients are paying that payment. They are negotiating. If they pay that price, they're negotiating a pretty hefty buy down that the seller pays for. That's the new norm. of what's happening right now. So I think that buyers want to buy. I really believe that. I think that there's ways to help them feel comfortable with buying, with a strategy with the seller and how they write their offer. Mm-hmm. I think it's the uncertainty in the world that's making people ultimately pause. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's the uncertainty in the agent communication, because I do think agents really don't know. So they're having a harder time leading their clients, right? Mm-hmm. I think there's uncertainty with the political environment, uncertainty with what are interest rates going to do.
Do you couple that with geopolitical environment, mm-hmm. things that are happening overseas? I think people who are paying attention to that are nervous mm-hmm. about what that means. I don't even know we know what that means, but they talk themselves into these things if they're paying attention to, or if they're watching nightly news or whatever.
Yeah. But back to your question on the interest rate, I think the Denver market responds really, really well between 5 and 6, I would say. Mm-hmm. I think that's where we're going to start to see demand kick up a lot. So I think that we almost in September we had rates close to right at 6%. Mm-hmm. And we saw a little bit of an uptick, not as much as I was thinking we would. Mm-hmm. But I think September is always a little it's not a hugely high volume month anyway. But I think once the rates do fall, especially under 6, I think a lot of people will get off the fence and get back into the market, because home ownership there's no other asset class like it. You know what I mean? So it still has value. I just think the uncertainty is making a lot of people uneasy right now.
Yep.
What are you seeing? Can I ask you, when you're at the kitchen table, because you meet with mostly sellers, right? So what are the sellers feeling right now with?
Well, it's interesting because I think that there is a contingent of sellers who have been unfazed or unknowingly unfazed about sort of the compensation conversation, where they're just like business as usual, mm-hmm. no change. That was what I was expecting. I want to sell my house. I know that if I offer a cooperating commission, that brings me the best buyer in the market. So I do think there's a whole contingent of sellers who are fine with this new change. I think there is a contingent of sellers, particularly and ironically in some of the saturated parts of the market. So the worse the market I go into, and I mean geographically in the market, meaning in an area of town where there's lots of new construction, or in an area of town where there's lots of for sale signs, mm-hmm. those sellers feel that they have to wring every drop out of the money conversation more than people who are still in maybe healthier or robust markets. And so I do think that the market condition is shifting the money conversation a lot. And I do think as market conditions shift, the money conversation is going to shift very quickly. And I think agents have to be prepared to have a different money conversation with a different client in a different market condition very quickly, where for my entire career, the money conversation with the client has almost always been the same or has felt very steady. And I think that change could be part of this, could draw onto the part of this anxiety. So I'm seeing saturated markets actually with a lot of downward pressure on just the money piece of it. I feel that a lot of sellers are ready to go right now, and they don't realize that the buyer pool is very thin. And I think the only reason the buyer pool is thin is simply that the buyers are just feeling like if rates are going to come down, they might as well wait a couple of months to buy instead of doing it now. And I feel like everybody is sort of waiting on something to happen, but I can't say for sure that there's anything you're waiting for. Smart people in this business know, you shouldn't actually wait for rates to drop. That's a bad reason to wait, because if you wait for rates to drop, the price of the house will be higher. Mm-hmm. So the buyers are very pensive, very tentative. Sellers are very eager. They still want to put their houses up for sale. They still are putting for sale signs in their front yards, and I'm still taking the listings because I've noticed the markets do these little hiccups where mm-hmm. bang, 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 we'll sell 3 houses. And then we'll go 3 weekends and it'll be really quiet and weird. And it seems like everybody's doing something they're not supposed to be doing besides buying a house. Stop looking at the fall colors, or, stop having Easter dinner, or whatever it is that you're not supposed to be doing. And then the next thing you know, bang, bang, bang. So I keep kind of taking the listings knowing that I actually don't have My crystal ball is so broken that I don't have the ability to tell you what weekend you should be on the market. So you should just put your house on the market and wait for the pops, basically. And so I am just taking in the inventory and saying it'll go when the market hits its little pops. So that's the advice I'm giving to sellers. The buyers, I say, don't wait. There's no reason to wait. And to your point about interest rates, I mean, March of 2022 marked the rise in interest rates. We had a bet.
Is that the year we had a bet?
That was the year we had the bet. We had a bet.
I won that year.
I think Jessica won.
I did win.
I'm pretty sure I bought a steak dinner. Yeah. Oh my, of course she does, and she did. And March of 22 marks a long time.
It does.
For people to wait to do the thing that they were going to do, like get married or get divorced or have another baby or whatever it is that's driving their decision to move.
Or get out of that house they bought during COVID that they hate.
Well, that they probably paid a lot of money for. And so, I do think that's a long period of time for that change to not be able to take place. And I do think people are waiting patiently to get out of their bad decision, right? And I don't, that's a blanket term for all the things that drive us to move. But that's some of the temperament I'm seeing in the market right now. Certainly sellers are calling. Their expectations for listing prices are very high right now. And buyers are expecting to steal a deal. And I'm not
how do
actually
we bring them closer? Who goes first?
Oh, that game of chicken solves itself.
Okay.
Because a buyer ultimately, their lease runs out or something happens where they just actually have to make a buying decision and they're going to pay a fair price to a fair seller for a house that they like.
Yeah.
I always say buyers buy their favorite house. Mm-hmm. So they're going to pick their favorite house and buy it eventually. Mm-hmm. And the game of chicken comes to roost when in the 9th round, the seller can take no more. So eventually the seller's like, oh, knock me out, I'm done.
Yeah.
And they just take a little bit lower of an offer or take a buy down that they didn't want to take, but because they're exhausted and they can fight no longer.
Yep.
And so that little game of chicken the buyer and seller are playing right now, they'll come together because they have to, because that's just the way the market works. It always finds equilibrium. Okay, so Jessica, you're at a new company.
I am.
Where are you and how do we find you?
Yeah, I'm at Homeowners Financial Group.
Okay.
I run the concierge team. Our primary market is here in Denver, but we're licensed in 16 states.
Okay.
So they're on my LinkedIn page.
Yeah.
And our niche is helping people transition between homes. So we do everything. We do first-time home buyers. We do, everything, down payment assistance. But what I really love, and I've just developed a niche here locally in the market, is that transitionary buyer where I own a house. I want to buy a different house, whether I'm downsizing or upsizing, and the strategy behind how to do that well and for the least amount of money. That's my jam.
You do these strategy meetings so well.
Thank you.
If somebody comes to you and they want to do this strategy meeting, what does that sound like, feel like for them? How much time do you take? How can they, is it electronic or in person or both?
Yeah.
Or?
Generally the first one is a phone call. And I like to offer that to people because a lot of consumers just don't even know where to start and they just have questions and they don't want to do a credit report or upload documents.
Right.
So I've started doing these strategy calls where, like, let's say, Amanda, you send me someone that owns a house, they want to move, but they're not sure how to do it. I'll just spend a half an hour with them just talking through their situation, and I try to learn their goals and objectives. Mm-hmm. We have a special needs kid, so we really don't want to be here when our home's being listed. We want to be in our new place and not have people in and out of our house or whatever their situation is.
Yep.
I love to hear their specific goals and objectives and then where they want to move and why and what do they want to pay, how much equity do they have. And then I like to devise a plan to help them accomplish their goals and pay the least amount of money to do so.
Yep.
So that's what we do in that strategy meeting. And then after we do the strategy meeting, we meet over Zoom. I have their finances in front of me, and I kind of help illuminate a path for them that resonates with what their goals are.
Yeah, well, it's such a good way because I think, a lot of buyers think they're just going to call and get a pre-approval.
Yeah.
And it just is so much, it's much more than that, for sure.
It's so complicated these days, like with the rates and the equity that people have and the cost of houses and all the things, right? People are in debt.
Yep.
Even though our market is the way it is, contingencies are still not preferred in the market.
Yep.
So there's just a lot of different dynamics that I have to help them understand what's your best play here and why behind it. And then also feel them out, because not every, as you know, not every single seller or buyer has the same level of risk tolerance.
Right.
So I really have to get to understand that client and then help formulate a plan that they can sleep well at night.
Yeah. Sometimes they think their risk tolerance is there, and then when push comes to shove, they realize this is a lot. Because it's a very complex process, a very unique and infrequent and highly expensive process. And sometimes they think they're ready to roll really fast, and then sometimes they have to step off of that a little bit too. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, you are really best in class, best in show. You are a lovely friend and a very, very talented mortgage strategic planner, mortgage strategist. Because it's just more than loaning people money. It's so much more than that.
Yeah.
I mean that really. You're very good at what you do.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I like to say strategic lending partner.
Okay.
I feel like that's a good way to say it, but thank you.
I was there. I just couldn't get the words out. I just couldn't get them out of my mouth. And so I'm so grateful for our friendship and for your time. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Okay. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you.